And we have a high duty to return this land and these resources to the people who follow us in better shape than we got it. We're finding that completing our goals of conservation is something which is going to be enormously hard to do in the time which remains. So it's going to require an extraordinarily high level of cooperation by all. And we continue investing in all the things that are important in this country. Cleaning up our waters, protecting our resources, protecting the national parks and the fish and wildlife refuges. It's not going to be easy. And it's going to require some hard choices. And it's going to require us to do some things that aren't going to be pleasant and are going to cause real difficulties and dangerous and bitter fights. So your understanding of these things on a local level, on a national level, is of great importance. I'm going to leave you with the thought that we're off to a good beginning. But I want to leave you also with the thought that we've got an awful lot to do.
And you folks are the heart and soul of conservation, especially in this area, because you care so much about it. You work so hard and supported the efforts of our great congressman, who truly does get it. And I wish he had a lot more people with him in Congress who understood the needs of natural resource management. You know, we hear a lot about climate change these days, and sometimes when we think about it, you'll hear the debate. Unfortunately, climate change in some respects has turned into a political debate rather than really talking about the science and what we know and we don't know. But we're already seeing the impacts of some of that. And I think when we look at Michigan down the road, we're probably going to see the impacts of climate change most closely when it comes to rain events and water situations. So when we look at this, I think we're going to have even more challenges. Because as we look, we've put people so close to that water that as water levels come up, that good brood habitat, that nesting habitat for ducks and geese is going to be squeezed right up against people's back doors. In some cases, up in the breeding grounds this year, we had floodwaters above the edge of that vegetation line, so that even though you had tremendous water, you didn't have brood habitat in close proximity to nesting. So we're going to see some of that. Periods of real drought, periods of fire. We've been very blessed in this state. Michigan has seen some very moist years during the month of May. But if it goes back to normal conditions, we could see, just horrendous forest fires across. But it's really our vanishing heritage and outdoor use. As we become one generation after another removed from living on the land, on the farm and the ranch across this country, people are becoming disassociated with the activities that brings them in the great outdoors. And that's probably my greatest fear, that we're raising kids who, quite frankly, don't feel comfortable being outside and playing, that don't seek that outdoor environment, who have lives that are so structured they don't get the chance to have free time, and their parents don't feel comfortable kicking them out the door and letting them play all day long like probably most of us grew up doing. People on the panel I've worked with off and on for years in various capacities. We all know each other on a first-name basis, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because there are some states where you don't have that kind of working relationship. So we've got lots of challenges, but I have no doubt if we put our minds to it, we put a person on the moon. We've got an international refuge. We can get this accomplished too, because it's going to take getting our voices heard and making sure the passion that fuels all of you, and I know it does, gets to Washington and gets to Lansing, and people hear that.
We've got global warming, the trends, all of you know this. You watch Lake Erie. If you look over the last 30 years, the average ice cover on Lake Erie is going down, down, and down. And it's continuing to go down. You have more evapotranspiration, more water is leaving the Great Lakes with less ice cover, and what does that lead to? Lower water levels. So the projection for Lake Erie is that we are going to have a 1 to 2 meter drop in water levels from what we are. So, 3 to 6 feet, say, okay? And what does that mean for a very shallow basin? that the shoreline is going to move lakeward, is going to move out towards the middle of the lake anywhere from 1 to 6 kilometers. Can you imagine that? So we have to rethink a whole bunch of things in that kind of a scenario. Think of how we draw water intake from a precise depth for our municipal water supplies. Think of our power plants that have to take, water in for cooling purposes, and it has to be taken from a particular depth. So there's some real challenges out there.
You have a summer that is 1 or 2 degrees colder on average. You have trout everywhere, and they are holding over and they're getting big. And the next summer comes along and it's just a tiny bit warmer, and the fishing will be, very, very poor. And so as we go along, everything that we've done to try to fix these streams and make them as healthy as possible, we're under a new massive threat. You can kind of tell this line in Michigan. Some of it has to do with geology, some of it just has to do with the latitude and the temperatures that we're at. A lot of southern Michigan, we don't have great trout streams. We only have a couple of them left down here, and we're trying to work to regain them. But if we don't work to make our streams more resilient to some warming, this line's going to proceed further up and up the state. It's going to mean that for fishing, that we're going to get further and further away from opportunities, local opportunities to have those particular types of fisheries.
With these heavier storms, that's part of climate change too, and we're seeing that already. And that's one of the legacies we recognize in Lake Erie. So I said, well, Rick, how's business? He said, business is down. He said, there aren't as many fish. I can't catch as many fish. He's a charter captain. And when I have to go much farther to catch them because there's algae bloom. We don't always see it on the shore. Sometimes the wind blows it offshore. But then, it's just a few hundred yards or a mile offshore, and then I got to try to get through all that to get to the fish. So he's seeing his business, he's seeing it on the ground in the lake, and I know you all are seeing it as well. That's one example. I don't know how many people know this, but Lake Superior last year was the most rapidly warming lake in the world. The surface temperature for Lake Superior last year, toward the end of the summer, was 70 degrees. Now that is unheard of. That's outrageous. You've been to Lake Superior. I've been to Lake Superior. It's supposed to be so cold that your head hurts when you get in, right? It's supposed to be so cold you can't see. 7 degrees, it's like a swimming pool. And nobody knows what all the implications are going to be for that. But one of them that we've already seen is that, you think, well, if the water's warmer, maybe we'll get more fish. We may. The problem is that we're going to get more sea land. And so the sea land producers are saying the sea land already are 50% larger than they were just a few years ago.
You guys had a hot, wet summer. We had a hot, dry summer. Not only did we have high temperatures, we had no water. You could ride your bike down the south branch of the Osavo River, and much of it, the water was that low. It went from historic highs in the spring, virtually unfishable, to historic lows this August and right now, where it's just unbelievable. It's virtually unfishable again. I see exposed areas in the Osavo that I've never seen before. Dry rock, dry areas that hold mayflies, dry areas that would be spawning ground come October. And this is on the upper river as well. This isn't just below mile. But if we continue to stay in the drought up there, we are going to have a very restricted area. Now, above mile, it's important to understand, that's a wild fishery, okay? That's not stocked. That's the best trout we can have, a wild trout. Those fish died this year, too, because the temperatures above mile were hotter than anybody could expect. 79 degrees and dam 4 sustained for over a 24-hour period. Okay. So we've got some problems, and there's a few things we can do at the edge, but I think it's going to take broader policy and long-term policy, or there could come a time when a lot of these cold stream rivers that you've heard about and fished and read about are going to become smallmouth rivers. Up in Oak Bend, smallmouth bass are wonderful fish. But we're going to lose our cold water fishery heritage in Michigan, and it might even happen in our lifetimes.
Unfortunately, not every seat and district is blessed to have the experience and knowledge that Congressman Dingell brings to his office. So we work to bring them to that point where they can support these issues and confront these challenges in the most honest and pragmatic ways so that we can all move forward together and try to avoid some of these pitfalls that we're facing today.